India Point Park is located in the Fox Point neighborhood of Providence. Today, the park is a hallmark of the city. Locals and tourists visit to enjoy scenic views.
Though the park is recognized as an iconic area of green space in the east side of Providence, little is known about the land's history beyond the colonial narrative.
A clear distinction is often made between green space and living areas. India Point Park in particular appears to be a testament to the separation between living space and green space. A huge sign announcing the park's location, coupled with a bridge separating it from the rest of the east side, designates the area as one that people occupy only temporarily. This association creates a false contrast between the environment and habitable land, which masks and justifies the displacement of indigenous peoples to make way for manicured land. It also contributes to the U.S. settler colonial project, dissociating native people from their land.
The dominant narrative surrounding India Point Park is visually represented through direct and indirect memorials seen throughout the space. This narrative of the park advances three key phases of history. India Point as port. The first port of Providence was established at India Point in 1680. Its name comes from the tea and spice trade with the East Indies. India Point as scrapyard. As the nation sank into an economic depression, the rail yards at India Point became a scrap metal facility. The 1938 hurricane and the construction of I-195 led to the area's end as an urban location. India Point as park. The rebirth of India Point as a park was advanced by Mary Sharp's fundraising and historical research efforts.
There are visible physical memorials of India Point Park as a port for spice trade, a scrapyard, and as a green community space. However, there are important aspects of history the park fails to acknowledge, particularly the park's relationship to indigenous peoples. This omission is notable by the lack of available information on the land's history beyond the colonial narrative.
While the park has created green space for Providence residents, it does nothing to acknowledge the Wampanoag, Narragansett, and other tribes who lived here before. When King Philip's War ended in 1676, the erasure of indigenous ways of life in southern New England increased. With the way cleared for further English settlement, Providence's reconstruction began, catalyzing widespread commercial development on stolen land. The omission of native inhabitants in the Fox Point area points to this national project of erasure. The exclusion of indigenous histories from this space contributes to the ongoing project of settler colonialism of this land.
In addition, the maritime imagery in the park reminds visitors of its past as a port. This is an area of Providence history that the city enjoys remembering, a time when it was an important center of trade for the East Coast. Yet there is no acknowledgement of the painful memories of slavery. The port was built by John Brown, a prominent profiter of the slave trade. The space today romanticizes Fox Point's importance as a port community, but does not attempt to recognize how it benefited from slave trade.
We believe it is the responsibility of those who directly profited from the violent history of India Point, such as Brown University, and local community members to work toward critical remembrance. In order to resist the continued erasure of indigenous people, the history of this land, and particularly its relation to Native people, must be recovered and recognized.
One example of a memorial to acknowledge the displacement of a people can be found in the Fox Point Cape Verdean Heritage Park's proposal for a monument. The history of India Point and Fox Point includes the disruption and displacement of the large Cape Verdean community. The director of the Cape Verdean Heritage Place, Claire Andrade Watkins, PhD, imagines the monument's significance to the Cape Verdean people. It will say, "We were here. Finally, in the city that displaced us, we will create something that comes from us."
Another part of acknowledging the history of India Point Park would be the recognition of Narragansett names of the land. India Point Park was nicknamed for its history as a port for trade routes connecting New England, East Africa, and the West Indies. We acknowledge there are many ways of thinking about public memory and the recognition of history. As students who are not from the area, it is not our role to decide how the past should be memorialized. However, we claim responsibility to learn and keep learning about the narrative of the land on which we live.